So let's get started because these are big topics and we're really just going to touch on them because they're really not the kind of thing that we can fully explain in a short period of time. But there are a lot of questions frequently about certain things having to do with Ayurveda, because it's kind of like when we learn a little bit about Ayurveda, it's like learning a little bit about anatomy and physiology. And I said this on the page a while back in response to a question about doshas and that kind of thing. When we learn a little bit about Ayurveda, it's kind of like just learning a little bit about anatomy and physiology. It's not like we're suddenly a doctor or can be a doctor. The lowest level of Ayurvedic doctor goes to school for 5.5 years. And that's a long time and a lot of learning. So when you learn a little bit about doshas and you learn a little bit about tridoshic theory and so on, it's really just scratching the surface. It's kind of like learning about the anatomy of the heart. You know more about the heart and how it pumps and oxygen and blood and how all those things work, but it doesn't give you enough information usually to know, what might be going on with your heart or the heart of someone who has a condition or a disease that's related to the heart. So it's a very vast, broad, and complex topic that takes years and years and years to learn. Even though I started learning it now 19 years ago, so almost 20 years ago, I will have tons to learn on my deathbed. So let's just talk a little bit about the things that I touched on, or that I said that I would touch on in this live. So everyone wants to know their dosha. Of course you do. It's so fascinating to understand yourself more deeply, and it's helpful to understand yourself more deeply. One of the main challenges with knowing your dosha is understanding the difference between Prakruti, also said Prakriti, and Vikruti, which is also pronounced Vikriti. Prakruti is your constitution. It's your dosha. It's what we call your dosha. Prakruti or Prakriti means nature. Vikruti is your current state. So oftentimes when we do a dosha questionnaire, and I can't even begin to tell you the number of things that are challenging about a questionnaire to determine your dosha. But it's especially challenging to use a questionnaire if you're older, if you haven't spent a lot of time thinking about your health or yourself, and if you also haven't spent a lot of time thinking about and looking at and deeply considering the broad spectrum of possibility that's out there. So let me give you one example. A dosha questionnaire says you have pale skin. So every ethnicity, doesn't matter what ethnicity you are, every ethnicity has people with more pale skin, and then with skin that has undertones that are pinkish, and skin that has undertones that are more tan or yellow, or ashy, kind of a grayish color. So the challenge of figuring out your own dosha comes with thinking about everyone that you know with your exact ethnic background and what the tone of their skin looks like and how that compares to yours. So that's challenging. You have to know a lot of people with your exact ethnic background, and we don't necessarily have that opportunity in our lives. Now here's another one that's often challenging. Someone says the questionnaire says you have medium-sized bone structure, and you gain weight easily, or you don't gain weight easily. Well, in our culture, number one, how do I know if my bone structure is medium-sized? I have to be looking at tons of people all the time and thinking carefully about what I see in them. So we don't look at someone and just see a skeleton. We look at someone and we see bones overlaid with muscle and fat tissue, adipose tissue, and so on. So I have to be a very skilled, critical viewer, and I have to have been looking for a long time to know if, compared to everybody else in the world, and especially compared to my own people in my own ethnic background, if I have a medium-sized bone structure. Then we also have challenges where I had a student once in my yoga class, and we were talking about Ayurveda one day. And she said, oh, I think for sure I'm kapha, I gain weight so easily. Well, I can tell you right now, she was a very small person, she was quite slim, maybe Vata with Pitta. And yeah, she saw herself as kapha because she thought she gained weight easily. But how do we know if we gain weight easily? What are we comparing to, right? So if you're only thinking about yourself compared to, the friend who can't gain weight at all, which probably is a Vata predominant person, then you're not going to have a very realistic view of whether you gain weight easily. So again, you also have to be very self-aware. You have to be comparing yourself to many other people. So this is the main challenge when we fill out a questionnaire. And that's why I often say it's good to do it several times over a course of weeks or months to ask someone else who knows you well to help you. Now, the things I've been talking about so far are only the physical things. What about the psychological things that are talked about in a questionnaire or that are asked about? So a Pitta type under stress, their first response will usually be an anger response. With a Vata type, it'll be a fear or a worry response. And with Kapha, they might not even notice what's going on. They kind of are very good at hiding their own emotions from themselves and insulating themselves against what's going on around them. So what if I grew up in a family where it wasn't okay to be angry? What if I grew up in a family where acknowledging my anger meant feeling deep, deep shame? Then I'm probably not going to perceive myself as someone who has an anger response under stress. I might be so good at immediately changing that anger response to sadness or concern for someone else, or just ignoring it, compartmentalizing it. So maybe I don't answer that question honestly, because unfortunately, maybe I'm not able to be honest with myself about who I am. So these are just a few of the reasons that a questionnaire is not sufficient to tell you your dosha. But that doesn't mean that it can't be helpful, and that doesn't mean that it can't get you close. Now, coming to the second point I wanted to touch on, Prakruti versus Vikruti. Prakruti is my nature, it's my dosha, it's my constitution. Vikruti is my current state. Another challenge with filling out questionnaires is, a very easy example, because it's a very common one, is you've been overweight for years, for decades. And so you answer some questions based on how you've looked for what you feel like is most of your life. But maybe when you were a child and a teenager, you had a different shape of body. But you don't really remember that shape of body and how it compares to other bodies. So when we're thinking about the difference between a Kapha individual and a Pitta individual, for example, a Kapha individual will always have more adipose tissue. They will also always have more fluid, and therefore they will have, usually more oily, healthy skin and lush hair. So you might have two people standing next to each other and they look like they're about the same size. And you know that they're a little bigger than average in terms of their overall size of body. But one of them has joints that look kind of average sized, and the other one has very big, well-padded joints. That is a characteristic of Kapha predominant individuals that once you see it and recognize it, you cannot deny. Big, well-padded joints. And luckily for them, that means they'll probably not be as likely to have injuries in their joints, arthritis in their joints, and so on and so forth, because they have lots of fluid, lots of padding. The point is that if we're filling out a questionnaire and we've had a health condition, a health issue, or a psychological challenge or mental health issue for much of our life, we might not have a very clear idea of who we were before that started. We might not remember. So when you're filling out a questionnaire to determine your Prakruti, your nature, your Dosha, your constitution, you have to be filling it out for the way that you were before the condition, the health condition, whether it's a mental or physical health condition, started to change your psychology and your physiology. And that's really, really hard to remember or to recognize or to be able to see, especially if we've had a condition, mental or physical health condition, for a very long time. So that's Prakruti. And when you first do a dosha questionnaire, the idea is you answer it based on who you've been for most of your life and or preceding a major health condition, which will change your psychology and your physiology. The second time you do the questionnaire, you're meant to do it to figure out your Vikruti, which is your current state. Now, many of the things won't change for your current state. If you have accurately determined that you have a medium frame in terms of skeletal frame, that doesn't change throughout your life. If you've determined that you have fiery, piercing eyes, that's probably not going to change either later on. So some of the answers when you do it the second time will be the same. But some of them, such as answers that talk about, or questions that talk about your mental state, questions that talk about even how you respond to stress. The way that you respond to stress, if you've had a long-standing condition, can change. So for example, I'm Pitta predominant, Vata secondary. I can recognize that many, many years ago, and if I'm even watchful now, my first response under stress is anger. It's anger, criticism, I'm mad. But I have not only have I gotten older, and therefore I'm moving toward, slowly, and I hope, toward the Vata stage of life. And so I will become more Vata in my physiology and therefore in my psychology, which means that as I get older, I have noticed I'm prone more to worrying. I'm prone more to fear. The fluids are leaving my body. It affects my nervous system differently. I behave a little more like my Vata secondary dosha as I age. Also, because I have practiced mindfulness for many years, that anger response is not so obvious. It comes, but it goes very quickly. So this is my Vikruti. My Vikruti is my current state. So my Vikruti might be that my response now to stress is more often fear and worry than it is anger. Now that doesn't mean that I'm a Vata type person predominantly. It just means that maybe I have a bit of Vata aggravation. That means that Vata qualities in my body and mind are higher than they were when I was born, higher than my natural amount. There are some things I can do to change that, but part of it is also because I'm moving toward the Vata stage of life. Now I'm still a ways away, maybe 20 years away from it. No, about 15. Geez, oops. So maybe about 15 years away from Vata stage. Technically starts around 70, but it's a continuum, right? So I'm slowly getting more and more Vata as I move toward that stage. So I can do things to mitigate those changes. I can change my diet, and I can put more oil and stay warm and make sure that digestion is good with some spices and so on. But sometimes I can't change it because it is just the time of life. I'm moving toward that stage in life. So I will inevitably become more and more Vata. And then every time I do that questionnaire, my Vikruti, as I get older, will show up with more and more Vata. And that will be my Vikruti, my present state. My Prakruti is still the same. It's what I was when I was born and what I am when everything is in balance. And the way you can make sense of that is, like I said, if you're getting older, I'm becoming more Vata, even though it's my secondary dosha. But if me and a Vata person are side to side, you will still be able to see that I am more Pitta than that Vata predominant person. Yeah? So it's always a comparison to everyone else, and with some things, especially those people who are within your ethnicity, so that you can compare physical features that are typical to your particular ethnicity. So that is why questionnaires make it really challenging. And then we ask the question then, well, how do I know if I want to make changes, if I want to be healthier, if I want to pacify the aggravated doshas in my body and mind, if I do that questionnaire and I see that even though I am kapha predominant, that I am getting lots of Vata in there, and I think that's Vata Vikruti, that's Vata imbalance, then how can I find some balance? Do I do what is good for kapha, or do I do what is good for Vata? How do I follow a food list with guidelines for the different doshas if my Prakruti is kapha, let's say kapha Pitta, and my Vikruti is Vata? This can happen, especially in our culture, because Vata aggravation, examples like especially mental symptoms of Vata aggravation, like restlessness in the mind, inability to focus and concentrate. These can be, from one perspective, a little bit, they're the natural way that kapha is. It can be difficult for them to pinpoint a specific thing mentally in their minds because it's a bit cloudy there. But the inability to concentrate because your mind is going from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, that is much more a Vata quality. You can't slow it down, you can't hold a thought, it's changing, it's mobile, that's mobility. So it's very common for people of all constitutions to get especially that kind of Vata aggravation. So how do you address it? If you are kapha predominant and you have a Vata aggravation, how do you address it? Well, again, the answers are so complex, but let me give you a few tips. Kapha and Vata are both cold. So if you are Vata predominant with kapha aggravation, or if you are Vata predominant, with kapha aggravation, or the reverse, kapha predominant with Vata aggravation, the best thing you can do for both of those constitutions, stay warm. Drink hot beverages, eat warm, moist food. If you're kapha predominant, you're going to cut down on the oil and the moisture a little bit, but it's going to be warm, and it's going to have some ginger and some black pepper. And same thing with Vata, it's going to be warm, have some ginger, some black pepper, but because Vata's dry, if you're Vata predominant with kapha aggravation, you're going to let yourself have a little more oil, more fluid in there. So these are just some examples. Basically, when we know our Prakruti, we know what we're aiming for. When we know our Vikruti, we know what is aggravated and needs to be pacified, as we say. And then what we do is we put into action a plan that will reduce or pacify the aggravated doshas without aggravating the Prakruti. So it can be challenging. There's absolutely no doubt that with certain combinations it can be incredibly challenging. Especially if you have, not especially necessarily, but, Pitta and kapha, one is hot and one is cold. So you don't really tend to use temperatures for those two. Those two are both oily. So if you have Pitta predominant, if you're Pitta predominant with kapha aggravation, then you're going to use oil. And then if you look at Pitta and Vata share the quality of light. So if you light, and the mobility of Vata can also kind of like fan the fire of Pitta's sharp quality. If you're a Pitta type person and you've noticed that when you rush, you suddenly become less nice. You're getting hotter, you're becoming sharper. Sharper in mind maybe, but also in tongue. And so you start to look at how the two doshas are interacting, how the Prakruti and the Vikruti are compared to one another, what the specific qualities of aggravation are, and this is really important, so it's going to really depend on how is Vata aggravated, How is Pitta aggravated? And so on and so forth. So I'm not giving you a lot of answers there that you can take home with you. What I wanted to do though is to really use this time to say, use the questionnaires, but please recognize that their place is as a finger pointing to a likelihood. There's no certainty in the questionnaires, and they're very challenging to answer accurately. And then finally, I wanted to talk just a little bit about using herbs and so on. So it's very common in our culture in the West for there suddenly is a popular herb. And everybody wants to use it, and it's in every store, and every health professional that has any interest in herbs is recommending it, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple different things I want to touch on with this. The first one is that I want to say that if you want to use herbs, that is wonderful. And many herbs can be used without, and vitamins and supplements, without a lot of knowledge about your Prakruti and Vikruti. So I don't want to worry you or freak you out by saying what I'm about to say. I don't want you to say, oh no, is this bad? Should I stop using this? Most things are generally regarded as safe, GRAS, as my Ayurveda mentor would say. So don't get too worried about what I'm about to say, but here are a couple of examples. I was teaching a workshop and a woman said, oh, I heard turmeric is great for you. Isn't it good? Isn't it great for skin issues and blah, blah, blah? You know what? Yeah. But what is your skin issue? How are you using the turmeric? How much are you taking every day? What is the potency of what you're taking? How long will you be taking it? So frequency, intensity, duration, as well as what is your goal? What is your aim? And what is your issue? So turmeric in small amounts tends to be cooling, but later it gets heating and drying if you take too much. So knowing the right amount to take, when to take it, and even in Ayurveda, there's the word is escaping me, but there's a Sanskrit word that means vehicle, and it matters how and when you take the herb matters too. So not just with food or without food, but if I take a certain herb with a certain kind of food, oftentimes it's milk or a milk substitute or something else with a healthy oil in it, or it can be honey, or it can be sugar. The vehicle will take the medicine will tend to take the medicine to a particular place in my body. We take a lot of things in tinctures and alcohol. So the benefit of taking things in tinctures is it's very fast acting. It goes into the blood really quickly, but it also kind of disappears quickly, and taking things in tinctures regularly every day over a long period of time might be not ideal for someone like Vata, for example. So you might want to take your herb also in a different way. Maybe you need a fast result right now, so you start taking it in tincture, but if it's something that you know is helpful long term, that you're going to take long term, maybe you change to taking the herb in capsules with a specific, and then you also want to look for things that have a specific amount of the medicinal ingredient, right? So the thing is that whether something is helpful or not for you can depend on your dosha. How long it will be helpful, or at what dosage or intensity or frequency, will also depend on both your Prakruti, your constitution, and your Vikruti, your present state. And then of course based on whatever your aim is. So if you're taking something to give you energy, so on, so on. There are certain things that might give you energy short term, but taking them in a certain form, you might not want to keep taking them in that form, like I said, maybe in an alcohol form forever and ever and ever. Or you might want to reduce the dosage, or you might need to take a break from using it. A good example is there's a lot of people I know who take oregano oil a lot. And oregano oil kills all of the bacteria in your body. It kills the good. So it's antifungal, antiviral, and antibacterial, but it kills the good stuff too. So it's really, really effective if you have a bug, if you have a virus, if you have a bacterial infection. But you need to stop taking it and then take some probiotics. Now, probiotics are controversial, and I won't say that they work because I don't know for sure, but I do use them myself in my way. And so all I'm saying is that what we really want to do is we want to make sure that we're clear about what we're taking, what its effects are, and what the best way is to take it for the result that we're looking for or hoping for. Finally, another thing that that I wanted to mention, and this one I have a little bit more of a charge on because it's an Ayurvedic herb. Ashwagandha has become incredibly popular lately. I know it's being Ashwagandha Brahmi, incredibly popular. Brahmi I'm less concerned about. Brahmi and Ashwagandha is how you might hear people say it. Ashwagandha, Brahmi as well, but especially Ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is a very heavy, which means difficult to digest, nutritive. Usually nutritive substances are heavy, so these are all Ayurvedic terms I'm using. It's heavy, it's nutritive, and therefore it's difficult to digest. So the reason when we're sick that we eat congee or khichdi or broth, and easy to digest things like soup is because when we're sick, our digestive capacity is really low. So we want to eat food that's well cooked, lots of fluid, simple things like salt, we get our electrolytes, so that it's very easy to digest. Foods that are higher in nutrition, especially ones that are higher in nutrition that's oil soluble, like nuts and seeds, and herbs like ashwagandha, they are very heavy and difficult to digest. Ashwagandha is a rasayana, it's a rejuvenative, and it is adaptogenic, so it can be good for all different types of people. It is heating, so it's not necessarily as good for a Pitta type person, especially not in summer, and especially not if that Pitta type person has Pitta aggravation. So it's not just good for everyone all the time. And the main point that I wanted to offer here is that in Ayurveda, ashwagandha is not taken along with other rasayanas. The same rule applies to all rejuvenatives and rasayanas in Ayurveda. They are not taken until the body is free of toxins. So first you stimulate digestion. So you use ginger tea, you use herbs that intend to stimulate digestion. That means bodily digestion, metabolism across the board. This isn't just digestion of food, it's digestion of everything. So first you improve the body's digestion, which is usually debilitated. And then you get rid of the toxins, which is made easier by improving the body's digestion. And then you take nutritive substances, because now you can digest them. If you take heavy, oily, nutritive substances in a body that has really poor digestive fire, so you're getting digestive issues, you have, acid reflux, you have gas, you have bloating, and so on, please don't take nutritive herbs. They're hard to digest. You're not only pouring your money down the drain, you're also putting something heavy and oily onto a fire that is already struggling to burn. So be curious, have an Ayurvedic consultation. In fact, soon we're going to start, very soon, we're going to start offering mentorship, coaching, and Ayurvedic consultations. The last one being with me, only because I'm the only one on the staff that does them, through Your Yoga Flow. So we'll put some information on the page here when they're going to be starting, which should be very soon. But even if you don't want to get an Ayurvedic consultation, there's tons of reputable websites on the internet where you can find out information about herbs. Try to look at a page that is from that herb's lineage. So if you want to know about ashwagandha, you want to know about brahmi, look at an Ayurvedic page that describes how and when that herb should be taken. If you're taking Chinese herbs, look for a page that describes how and when and by whom that herb should be taken, and in what dosage and for how long, and so on and so forth. So it's very complex, and that doesn't mean that you can't use it. Also, a wonderful book is the Complete Book of Ayurvedic Home Remedies by Dr. Vasant Lad. And I will put the link for that book under this live. And that's our time. I just yapped my face off for 30 minutes. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so grateful. We're all so grateful for all of you and so happy to have this amazing, burgeoning, blossoming community that's growing all the time. If you have any questions, fairly sort of simple ones, please feel free to put them under this live and I will answer them when I get the chance over the next couple of days. If they're really specific, think about doing some research on Ayurvedic pages, getting the complete book of Ayurvedic home remedies, or booking a consultation at some point. Thank you so much and have a beautiful Monday. If you're in Canada, it's Family Day. In some other provinces, it might not be called that, but wishing you a beautiful day. Namaste.